Of course, there are plenty of bankers, software engineers, consultants applying to the world's top business schools. But the diversity that the world's top schools attract is really part of the experience you can look forward to in the MBA. And Stanford doesn't have the monopoly on people that are looking to change lives and change the world. And I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Deakin. Nick is from the London Business School class of 2017. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now you're on one of the upper floors in Canary Wharf because, of course, now you're a VP for investment banking in EMEA in healthcare. You studied medicine at the University of Bristol, got your master's from Keele in ethics and law. This is this wonderful diversity that I was describing earlier. And then there was a chance conversation that you had one day with a partner from McKinsey who said, why don't you try interning and see what that brings? Chance conversations can really matter in life, right? In terms of ideas that they might spark and opportunities that they can create.
I think definitely, and I think particularly for those of you who are on careers where there's a very clear trajectory of what's expected. So medicine's a really good example, but you start when you graduate and then you keep going down a set path, and then 15 years time in the UK. You're a consultant with a practice specializing in a certain area. For me, I essentially, had a very, very amazing time at the end of med school. Everyone else went off to Asia or Africa to vaccinate kids. And I ended up spending time in the healthcare practice at McKinsey, looking at how we inspect hospitals, what we look for. There was a few big scandals in terms of excess deaths in the UK in terms of hospitals, and essentially the people that look at that in the Department of Health had hired McKinsey to come up with a new structure to inspect that system. It was a very chance encounter. I thought that this sounded really, really interesting and a way to change lives in a way that you just couldn't do on the same scale if you did standard electives. And ended up spending 2 months at McKinsey, and then being kept on when I was a junior doctor as a consultant part-time, which was pretty stressful, but really, really rewarding. And I was kind of getting between, in my annual leave as a doctor, between London and then Washington and Philadelphia to look at health systems over there and apply the same stuff that we'd done in the UK to the US system, which really opened my eyes to how much more money there is flowing into healthcare, in North America than there is in particularly the UK. You only have to look at percentage spend of GDP. You see 9 versus 17, and then you realize there's more money flowing around. And you also realize when you're a doctor, it's all about the patient in front of you, but actually there's a whole ton of stuff that doctors prescribe and doctors do, all of which is essentially powered by money flowing from investors who back ideas and who back research, which then pushes the frontiers of what doctors can do. And I think that the time with McKinsey really, really opened my eyes to the fact that there is a business world and there is all these strategies and frameworks and this thing called finance and money, which actually drives a lot of innovation in healthcare, particularly now in health tech as well. And I wanted to learn more about that and expand my network to include not just doctors, but people who are at the cutting edge of that stuff as well. And that started the MBA journey, and then it's kind of continued on that path with my time in investment banking.
Right. So you must look at the last 7 months, pressures on the NHS, big pharma looking for vaccines in all of this. Now, you already had many years of study behind you. Any doctor does, and the idea of then returning to school to get your MBA and the additional skill sets and the network that would come with that. Why London Business School?
I think a few reasons. The first, I think, for me was I wanted an international network, but really based in London and homed in London. London is home. It's where I wanted to be. I'd spent some time by this point in Cambridge in the US, and also worked for McKinsey in a few cities in the US. And really, I wanted to build a network out of London. There is nowhere quite as international or diverse as London as a place and LBS as a university. I think, secondly, everyone who I'd interacted with at LBS was not just impressive as a person, but also impressive as a person and their achievements, but also somebody who I felt like I could connect with, and who I felt at home with. And that's not something that I got from all the schools that I visited. And then the third thing was, I think particularly looking at finance and strategy, there's kind of nowhere else in I want to say Europe, but you can correct me otherwise. But I think the reputation that LBS has, particularly in finance and banking and the other alternative routes of VC and PE, I think the network and the fact that within 15 minutes of Regent's Park, which is the kind of beautiful green campus, I can be in the middle of Canary Wharf, I can be in a hedge fund in Mayfair, I can be in a PE firm in the Strand, I could be anywhere in 15 minutes, which is great for, these roles where it's not just about being a number and applying, it's about connecting with the individuals that you're talking to.
Right. Well, we're glad that you're neither in the Stand, Mayfair, or anywhere else tonight, but on this. Now, in terms of the finance courses, you're obviously paying attention given the role that you now have at Citi, but also beyond the classroom at London Business School. You were named one of the top 5 future leaders by the FT, the Out in Business conference, and a leadership role that you played. So as you reflect on the highlights of that experience at both a sort of an academic, but also a personal level, what really stands out for you?
Good question. I think part of it is around the amazing connections that I made through the student clubs. So, LBS, despite the kind of turnover every 1 or 2 years, has amazing connections and opens a ton of doors. So, in Healthcare Club, I spoke to Alex Gorski, who's CEO of J&J, within my first 2 weeks. We had a consulting talk from the CEO of BCG. We had, I interacted with and brought the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, who was the first openly gay Prime Minister, of a big European country, to LBS, and he brought his whole team to our LGBT conference and told his coming out story. Same with Lord Black from the Telegraph Media Group in the UK. Ton of people in my network went, expanded crazy and kind of crazy. It was totally unexpected and really, was amazing. I think the people I met in terms of the classmates and the course, I cycled to Richmond with a few of them last weekend, which was the longest cycle so far. Only took up cycling during lockdown, and it was progress, so that's good. Amazing people all over the world. I have friends in Israel, in New York, in San Fran, in Europe, and then a ton of Americans actually who moved to London and stayed here because they liked it on this side of the pond. And then I think I come back to the academics and the connections I made in that way. I still speak to a handful of professors about their research and actually do help out in some way in some of the CSR research, looking at the LGBT, particularly at the LGBT and diversity angle and what companies are doing. I'm helping with them set up an exec ed course for LGBT leaders at LBS, which will be one of the first in Europe. So I still have a lot of connections academically as well as the school. And I think, the ability to put that to work and to kind of feel connected is really, really great. And it adds to my daily life, as a banker as well.
Right, and it's an extraordinary and inspiring network, and they also can keep you going on that long cycle ride to Richmond. I mean, with that experience in the 2 years at the school, what do you then learn about yourself? Sort of holding up this mirror, exploring, your own sense of identity, goals that you have, the things that matter to you.
I mean, look, I think I entered and left a totally different person, in a good way. Much more self-assured, much more, I think in medicine you learn by doing. And I think LBS taught me all the frameworks and strategies and the right language and how to ask the right questions. And actually you realize in banking and in finance more generally, if you know how to ask the right questions, you don't have to understand everything about the legal due diligence on an asset or, the intricacies of the marketing strategy, but you do need to know how to ask the right questions. And I think for that, and the kind of broad experience I had academically was super, super helpful. And that just makes you much more assured as a leader and as a practitioner, right? So I think that's super helpful, and it means that I am very adept at, business school, a bit like the network at LBS. Now it just opens a ton of my job. It's IB, so I'll be on the phone with the CEO of this multi-billion-dollar pharma company, and you have to hold your own, right? And you have to defend your analysis and ask them for probing questions and check that their numbers are tally with what you've got. So I think the idea that I would have done that before LBS, I think, is quite I'm doing totally different stuff, and in a way, with the self-confidence that I think I just wouldn't have had before.
Right, and now a VP at Citi with the IB role. That in part came from an internship that you'd done between year 1 and year 2. How does London Business School then help to open up those different pathways?
I mean, the Careers Centre was amazing at connecting you with the banks and with with finance firms. So I think that was a big part of it. Also did a ton of networking through through the people that came to campus, or through my own network, or through the LGBT networks of the banks. I think that's helpful to get a gauge on culture and where you'll be comfortable. Because I think even within the different banks and consulting firms and tech firms, there's actually very different cultures, and they look for certain types of people. And I think you have to think, well, you don't have to think this way, but I think it's helpful if you think, where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, and are you surrounding yourself with the kind of people that you can envisage working with for that period of time, because all those jobs are intense. So I think that was part of it. I think there was the academic part, which goes without saying was very, very good. And then I think what you don't realize is the courses that you use most every day are actually not the ones on how you value a bond, or how you price something, or even the PE courses. It's the courses on how do you manage people, how do you motivate people, how do you communicate in a way that's effective, and these are the things when you're managing up and down and trying to, particularly in the kind of roles we talked about and the roles that post MBA all of your listeners will be going into. These are the skills that you really need, and this is going to make or break you, and it's going to make or break your weekends as well, right? So I think those are the skills which you don't appreciate at the time, but they're the ones that really help shape your life, and they also help you think with a bit more of a medium long-term view as well, I think. So even now it's kind of what experiences do I need to have in IB to open up the doors that I want to be open in a few years' time. And that relates to the kind of clients you work with. It relates to the kind of way that you operate. It relates to the aspects of work that I really, really enjoy and push for, if that makes sense.
Right. David Simpson on the admissions panel at CentreCourt admitted that they just saw record high application volume in round 1 last month. So as one of the most selective business schools, what would your advice be in terms of someone sharing their story, and perhaps even just taking advantage of stepping back to think about where you want to be 5, 10 years from now? The application to business school is a great opportunity for that.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think mine was a bit of a rush because I did it all during an A&E, when I was in the emergency department or the A&E department, and I decided with about, and David will tell you if you ask him, but I decided with about 3 months to go before the round 4 deadline that I was all go and to sort everything out, which was a bit of a rush. Don't do that. But I think I think talking to people at the school, so you get an impression of, as I talked about the culture of banks and tech firms and consulting firms, you have to do the same with business school. And I think unless you talk to people who are actually experiencing it now, or have experienced it and gone through it and gained, what they've gained from it, ask them, what was your highlight? What would you change? what things do you use every day? You know, I think talk to people. That's the first thing. I think look at the employment reports really kind of with a fine-tooth comb to see who recruits and in what volume they recruit. Because, you know, we as an example, as a bank, there's a ton of schools that we will recruit from, and then, you know, if you're not at those target schools, it's actually quite hard post MBA to get in. So I think, you know, looking at who recruits and why and how that tallies with what you want out of business school is really important. And yeah, then I think it's to some extent that's also looking at what alumni have gone on to do in 5 years' time. And, you know, if somebody is, if you want to go into PE and somebody's running a big PE fund and they went to your business school, and that's always a good sign, right? So I think doing your research on the electives and the courses and the people is the most important thing.
Great. Well, hopefully CentreCourt contributes to that, and certainly having voices like yours and that sort of insight and advice, I think is a big part of what we're trying to capture. So thank you for taking the time to share those ideas with our audience, and it was a pleasure having you with us. Thanks very much, Nick.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.